Project planning and design is an exam made to test your competence in the design development phase of an architecture project. It's supposed to be the second hardest exam in the series, but there are some ways to make it easier with the right method. Hi guys, I'm Brandon with I'm the Studio. Today I'm going to give you my experience and my best recommendations for passing a project planning and design exam in the architecture registration exam series. In this video, part of my How to Pass the ARE free YouTube tips series, I'll be detailing what the exam is, my experience failing, passing, or just winging it, my thoughts on suggested resources, and everything you need, pitfalls, myths, and everything in the exam strategy to pass the exam. Check out my other videos in the description below for more links, and this is your first time coming to the I Am the Studio channel, consider subscribing and clicking the bell for notifications so you know when the next architecture and design tutorials are coming out. This is going to be a different format. Just starting for introducing ARE content because there are some great resources from NCARB that talk about the exam and who best to go through. In fact, I printed it out multiple times, went through them, and so that's going to be part of this video. As I break down the sections, I have my own outline that I have to my screen, so there's a little bit of like a vlog format, and so just follow along as I go and share so that you can see what I'm working on as I go through. First of all, let's just get the project planning and design exam defined. Essentially, it's going to be a 4 hours and 5 minute exam. I'm going to go ahead and show you my screen. So project planning and design, this is the ARE 5.0 handbook. And you see that for the exam, we have the 5 sections of this exam, and the time frame for that is on the second page of that section. It is going to be a 4 hour and 5 minute duration for the exam. There's 100 items. I did want to differentiate this time, because sometimes I talk about things that are not scored. The scored items are 91, but you need to take everything as if it's scored. Just a small note. Okay, just back to defining the test. You have your optional break for 45 minutes, and what you can consider from looking at this 4 hours for 100 exams is you could, of course, easily say, oh, that means, thinking about 240 minutes, I have 2.4 minutes per answer, but that's not true because the case studies are going to take most of your time, and so just be thinking about that sort of concept, because essentially it's saying about 32 to 40 items are going to be case studies, so that that could be about 60 that are going to be multiple choice. So that 60 multiple choice does not to have the same time, because you have to read the case study and everything. So that's the initial structure of the exam. Let's look at the sections for the exam. The exam is talking about what's considered to be the design development phase. That means you're going to really need to know a lot more about the systems. The programming and analysis exam was talking about sight and sun. Now you need to know that, and you need to know about the different materials, the different systems, HVAC, electrical, plumbing. These things are really important because you are putting the building together in a competent way. You're getting the project ready for construction documents, and so it needs to be in that knowledge. For a licensed architect to be managing that, he has to know quite a few things. Okay, so that's the background. So now as we look at the exam, let's look at it from that point of view. The environment context, or conditions and context, it's talking about that set of knowledge you learn in programming and analysis. That's putting all this information that you needed to figure out the site, the organization, and you're going to be tested on that in the exam. So the idea is that's just like a small segment, a reason to study that really well for the exam. Next, the section is codes and regulations. So you need to know about codes. That's knowing about the International Building Code. You need to know how you can apply it. When you're given that in the case study, you need to be going through it quickly to find out what you need, and that's going to be what that is about, and you need to be having that understanding for that. The section number 3 is building system materials and assemblies, and that's both the material science, that's building system engineering, so knowing all that is going to be really critical. Section 4 is going to be project integration and program of program and system. That's essentially you being able to work out a program for a particular need for a client. You know, if we need the lighting to be in this way, we need this organization, you're going to put that together. And the final one is project cost and budgeting. So essentially you're going to be needing to do math. And so you need to get familiar with the type of problems that are going to be needed to be calculated, so you can be putting that together, you know, way before your exam. So like, as soon as you get to the question, you know, I need to face this in this particular way. So there's a section. Let's break down their divisions within the exam. So as you can see, the largest percentage of the question is going to be that project integration of program and systems. That means you're putting together plans, showing how things are working together. So when you see the test result, it talks about maybe you failed one section, and some people think maybe you know, maybe I passed all these other sections. No, there's actually a minimum passing score, and the issue is if you don't get that minimum passing score, it doesn't matter. You know, you got more or less on the section. The idea is like, if you get a certain amount passing, it doesn't matter if one section was really weak. The idea is you passed. So you need to have really great competence with all the sections. So don't let this confuse you. Let's go back to here. So, but that's essentially going to be this concept that you know you're going to prepare definitely for these types. If you have some issue with a particular area, make sure you know that, you know. But now let's look at some of the resources for the exam. I'm going to go into the myths just a little bit later, but I want to go for the references so I can give you my experience with which references are good and, you know, better or worse. You know, they're all pretty good, but the idea is you need to have a focus for as you're taking the exam. That's part of my experience to share with you. Okay, so here are some of their recommendations. When I first started, I just had like maybe building construction illustrated from a previous, you know, in fact, I think I had all these books from like a decade ago when I was in architecture school. However, I knew I needed to take my level up, because when I was studying it, when I was doing my practice exams, I was like, wait a minute, I didn't study this. So actually, I invested in these books. And I also went to the reference matrix, which actually had several other books. I spent way too much on books, but the idea is like there's a lot of little nuanced information. You're not going to read the whole of these books. Now let's go through them a little bit. So architecture graphic standards is self-explanatory. Maybe your office has one or your school. So the idea is like you really just need to go through understanding how particular systems work. You know, you can try to read it. It's thousands of pages. I think it's better to say, let me go to a certain level. That's why, of course, I recommend some of the exam study resources like ARE, exam prep, maybe Black Spectacles, Amber Book, because the idea is like, you know, a lot of these systems, like you're not just going to read them. It's good to like have a focus study, because you're like, hey, let me study this system. The great thing about graphic standards is that it does have a breakdown in each of these systems. So, you know, here are metals, here's masonry, here's wood, here's steel. And so the idea is you're looking as you go through these to gain competence in that area. The same thing sort of applies for building construction illustrated. It was great. You know, I even just went through and started sketching some of the details because I wanted to know sort of how things actually look, which is going to be important in your exam, because you know the idea is it's preparing you to be competent with drawings. You know, like I worked at a firm, and you know definitely the principals were like very much insistent that you know what you're drawing. You're needing to know a whole lot more for this exam, because it's, you know, really trying to prepare you for all the exam. All the issues, you know, in daily practice, where you have to look at several drawings, you have to put together this competent set of information so that it can be translated and built. It's really great. Building Construction Illustrated. There's also Building Codes Illustrated, which I also purchased. It's useful for me, but again, it's the expense. But it's great to just be drawing and going through those drawings, understanding which things are which. You can draw it and diagram all day, but like the idea of knowing it is much different. So it depends on your experience. It's still very valuable to just know even the book way of how things are put together. Heating, cooling, lighting, sustainable design methods for architects. Incredibly valuable. I I definitely read like 60 to 70% of that book. Went through reference. It was great, showing about things like geothermal. There's a really question about geothermal that I didn't understand before. Now I understand, like look at how deep it goes, like this is how it works. So understanding that, like having like my clarity on what does it mean for the building to be on the, have a window on the north or the west side, how to consider the difference for when a monitor or a skylight is facing, how does that affect the space? Understanding that is really broken down in that book, and it has like several different examples. It's a great professional resource as well. And just understanding how to deal with those situations is really useful for this exam. Absolutely useful. Mechanical, electrical equipment for buildings. This is an incredible resource. Don't read this type of book just straight through. I mean, I tried and I stopped, but I found other sections that were really useful using the ARE5 community. There are several sets of sort of what's useful. So like I just went through, I definitely scanned all the chapters that were really important and just went through just to really understand some different terminology. I'm going to quickly go into for the ARE handbook, talk about some of the ideas behind the NCARB's putting of questions. It says it's talking about how do you comprehend these exams and how the questions are structured. It's for understanding and applying, or analyze and evaluate. It's not just pick an answer that you remembered. It's about like application. And so the thing about reading the definitions in context in a book like Mechanical Electrical Equipment for Buildings is that you're getting the context. For instance, when you're talking about sound and sound design, like I saw several different ways that sound design could be done for a building. For instance, like sound is going to bounce on the back wall, so your back wall needs to have some sort of padding. You want to understand what's the difference when the sound is trajectory going up or down. How about soundproof panels? Understanding those sort of ideas were in the book, and there's actually an online version that you can download for free. Most of these are either paid or for different resources. Again, like the printed book is really great. Kindle has a great variety as well. So I liked having both sometimes, having a printed and a little Kindle version where I could read on my phone. You're looking for terms, you're looking for understanding the situation. That's a great reason for the books. The books have tons of things that are not super necessary. So that's why you will look at that lens of the items in the exam for saying, okay, I'm going to be dealing with this and maybe have a weakness on understanding this. Things that you can't have an issue with, I really feel for this exam are things like your materials. Like you need to know metals, you need to know wood, you need to know steel, etc. Now I'm going to say also as I go through this, this does not talk a ton about structural references. Don't be deceived by that. When you look at the formulas that are given, there's some formulas that you can learn. Like when I went to the PPI resource, I did understand that was like, hey, that was really top heavy on understanding those questions. But what I really, feel that I loved how Amber Book went through it. Okay, so, and I'm going to talk about that in my experience for understanding it. You need to have the deeper than concept. It's not just the concept. These formulas might seem a little bit stressful at first when you're talking about, okay, flexural stress, vertical shear. The idea is like you do need to have the concepts and the formulas at the same time. And the same thing for electrical formulas, right? Like, do I use this really in practice? Not really, but the idea is it's important. Working with a lighting engineer and a lighting consultant, I really had to make sure, hey, look, is this really providing what we want? This design, they were providing different light specs. So it's important to know the ideas. And this is a great reason to go to the do your practice exam, because you see the resources that are going to be included with the exam. So there's a lot of these that are actually given, but having the concept that this is what will be needed at this time is important. So again, there's also plumbing. This one is really important. The HVAC, that's also very important because you're knowing how to calculate a system for a load, and that's another thing in the NCARB book. that it tells you like, how to size a system. Also the architect handbook is a great one as well. And I'll put like some links to some books that I found really useful for this. Don't stress out. Typically you will see like most of the formula that you would need, but having like a general understanding of these is really useful because it'll probably give you like some of the details, and also it'll give you like these in the exam so you can look at the resources with the exam. So I just wanted to give you that, as well as talking about the resources, because essentially that's a resource in the exam. This exam and PDD are really going to need a lot of the formulas, so knowing that is going to be really important. Let's look down at the reference matrix attached to find out a little bit more for things that might be useful. And so we're looking here at PPD, so that's green. It recommends going through the ADA. If you're working in a firm, you've probably done like some ADA exercise, so it's useful to definitely go through and the diagrams are really useful as well, because you're looking at the dimensions. Most of my exam resources went through ADA, so like I'm pretty good at that, so I think that's definitely something you need to be going through. Architect's Handbook of Professional Practice, again, find the sections that are most relevant, but it's definitely something you need to be going through. The Studio Companion, that's the book that I definitely say helps you determine like sizes and different systems, structural systems, how to think about what's going to be needed. Because the first thing you're thinking about when you're designing a building is, that system, what's needed to design this building, what's the size, what's the code implication. So this is really useful for that start of your design, your preliminary design. Essentially, it's almost like as if everything on this page is ticked. Architectural acoustics is not something that I went through, but if you really have an interest in that, that's something you can be pursuing. I did get Building Codes Illustrated. I found that very useful. I think Building Construction Illustrated was pretty fine. Also, Building Structures was something that was recommended for both PPD and PDD. I did get that. I didn't really touch on it too much. Some of the other resources are really great for just really understanding it, including Amber Book, but also Daylighting Handbook. Did not get, but it sounds very interesting. Dictionary of Architecture Construction sounds useful. Didn't get that one. The Framework for Design Excellence is something I went through that. It's free and it's a great resource. I went through it. It was very useful. Fundamentals of Building Construction, I definitely skimmed some of that. I think that's something we started in school, so I just went through like the previous version. Green Building Illustrated is something I did not get, though it sounds useful. The Green Studio Handbook also I did not get. The idea for those resources is that it's important to know about sustainable building. If you don't have that training, like I taught green design, so I have like more background on that, you might want to find that or go to website resources like the Whole Building Design Guide for that. Now, heating, cooling, and lighting, that's super useful. I definitely went through that, spent a lot of time through that. I did not go through HOK Guidebook. Some of the free resources I definitely had to go through. ICC A1117, so this is the ADA. I found that very useful. I did go through that. And also International Building Code. So this is something that you need to stamp in your mind, like even know the way that the chapters are outlined. Calculating the sizing for a building, how to say the capacity, knowing the fire code. These things are in the International Building Code and something you need to really be familiar with. So that would be what I would star at the most important. And again, this is MEB at the bottom. It has like I think two versions or so. Yeah, they're both very useful. I did buy Olin's Construction Principles, Method, and Material. I found that very useful. I definitely went through that. Didn't go through the Planning and Urban Design. I didn't go through the Plumbing, Electric, Acoustics, Sustainable Design Methods. Again, these are definitely suggested. I think, I'm putting the ones that I use, some of them I just bought. But also Professional Practice of Architectural Work and Drawing. That sounds interesting. I didn't ever get that one. It sort of goes on and on. You're gonna probably spend like $5,000. I think the ones that I mentioned that I got and the ones that are there are definitely going to be ones that can hold you. But if you have an interest or you find yourself with a really weak spot, I would definitely look at the description for a book. Maybe ask some people if they got it. In fact, I was super interested in the Architect's Handbook professional practice, but I asked some other architects, they didn't even go through it. So it's sort of funny sort of situation when I was like going through it and they hadn't even got that one. So yeah, even these books I didn't get. Structures I think I got. Sun, Wind, and Light, I was very interested. I was very tempted. I think it was useful for PA, programming analysis, but didn't get it. And also didn't get any of this visual dictionary or sustainable construction. So just because I didn't get it doesn't mean it's not useful. These are in the catalog, so it's something that might be a resource to you. So I'm not going to push you away from them, but saying, hey, you remember your target. You're looking for those 5 sections and how to address them as a competent architect. So the idea is like, where is your lack of competency? What have you been doing mostly? When I was doing a lot of residential design, I knew that I needed to know a lot more about codes and commercial things. So I knew I needed to fill up on that area. And even in terms of saying how my specification was, I knew that things like MEB were really critical for me to get a bigger foundation on. And so in looking at those references, I did want to also now say those are for the publications. The codes that were needed. You see the contract documents aren't really recommended, but it's nice to know them. Don't neglect studying for the whole exam a little bit while you're studying for this exam. Building code and ADA are going to be the things that are critical for knowing this exam, and so that's true. It definitely wasn't really talking about the owner-architect agreement in PPD. They have the right to put any part of the exam at you, in the exam. But the idea is they're pretty much probably going to focus on the things that are listed here. So those are the references that will help you as you're tackling those 5 sections. And I'm going to go through again. Let's break these down so we can get like some understanding of each one by what type of questions you're going to see. I will push into let's start by looking at the environmental conditions in context. Again, that's talking about programming analysis, so that's talking about like you're dealing with a site. This is looking at sustainable principles, so that's the reason why there's a lot of resources talking about that area. But you're talking about where is the building located, how is it going to be structured. Let's look at the first example question here. So this is talking about a preliminary drainage analysis for a small land parcel, and a code allocation indicates slope of 1% or less. The land parcel is intended to be developed into a suburban shopping center. Which types of stormwater management systems should the architect recommend? So, before answering, already I think I recommend like coming to the ideas for the exam, like before you even get started here. The idea is, I'm just going to break it down that you need to focus on like, think about budget, think about what's realistic, right? We're not trying to do like something that will cause a maximum change. We're looking for things that are affordable, that are simple. I think that's one of the reasons why we can knock out things like on-site gray water treatment or planet with, stormwater wetland, planet with native vegetation. I think type of design is for, let's see, small land parcel, suburban shopping center. So like that's a keyword, right? So, you're looking for keywords, like if it says, is it a church parking lot, or, if it's a church, is it a house, you'll be thinking, okay, it's going to need a big parking lot, or if it's a tower, it's going to have very deep foundation. So for this one, it definitely needs something like parking space. We're thinking about how to deal with the biggest problem on the site, right? Foundation drainage, it's not a tower needing such a thing, or it's not a house. A house would use that foundation drain. But something like a cistern, things that would go on the parking lot are immediately the case. So that's looking at that section. I think I want to break down a little bit before going into the rest of these about some of the myths about this exam, because essentially the idea is that you want to be focusing on reality when you're taking the exam. Like people put it as something that's super hard, but if you are knowing about the systems that you're going to be using, you're not going to be getting to this exam and like saying, oh, this is too hard. The idea is that the exam is really, it's very book knowledge, like the idea is like, where do you put that north and east, the codes, like you can go through the code. It's essentially, it gives you the code, like you can be navigating the code through the exam. So there's no reason for you to be, for the case studies, or they'll give you a certain code that you could be using for particular questions. There's some like, universals that you should be going through and having familiarity with. That's why I recommend going through the code and even like writing out the section so you know exactly how to get from point A to point B to solve a problem. And so the myth about it being hard is like, this is part of your facility of memorization being used, but again, we're not trying to go away from being able to apply and to evaluate. But the idea is, that's going to really help you to find time to study that and study those structures, because you'll be knowing how to get through this resource and you know how to face these problems. Okay, so I will go through as well the next section. We're going into the codes and regulation. And so as we look at this is where it's breaking down definitely into the building code. I mean, it's like, hey, do you know how to apply that? Do you know how to think about zoning? You're going to be looking at different zoning laws and saying, okay, boom, 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 this is in the zoning that it can be done, or it can't be done. So having experience with that, like figuring out residential zoning codes, I had to figure out, hey, what is it saying? So Architect Exam Prep has some great ones. Different study resources have like some great zoning codes that you're just filtering through to find out what's applicable to the question you're answering. So you don't have to go through the whole one. You just have to know what you're looking for. For instance, if it's saying, okay, this thickness of wall for adobe, etc., is not allowed. All right. So the idea is like, you need to know exactly where to find it. And so I think it's great that you can also search for keywords in some of the NCARB tests. But sometimes it just gives you an outline, and that's actually something you can be using to find it. So just knowing where to look is going to be really important when you're thinking about codes. Codes is not like you have to memorize everything. You just memorize some of the basics, and then you'll be able to find whatever else you need. So for instance, for this question here, it talks about an office building is proposed for a rectangular suburban office park site measuring 300 feet by 600 feet. The program requires an uncovered grade entrance plaza of 30,000 square feet, a 120,000 square foot below grade parking, plus 450,000 gross square feet of office space. Setbacks must be free of built improvement. Okay, so essentially, like this one, immediately I know I need to calculate a little bit, right? You can even see on the right hand side, there's some steps. So you have that digital whiteboard, you're not trying to be Picasso or something with art. You just need to get out the key things, like make a text box and just deal with each set of the problem. I get this many square foot for the lot, right? It tells you it's 300 by 600 feet. You can just draw a little box and say 600, 300, and then you just turn the numbers into words, very simply, like this side, this side, this side, and you're just adding it up like a simple formula. So that's the type of thing that you're going to find. Even though this is code, of course, this is asking for a calculation, but the idea is you're simplifying it to meet a code. And of course, I think math is hard for you. You might just try to figure out the basis of it, answer it. Don't let it go past 2 minutes. Come back to it if you're having something of a challenge with these type of questions. This question says, IBC contains requirements for ventilation of attics and concealed roof spaces for which of the following reasons? So this is a logic question, right? It's like saying, what's important about it? What's important about it? Like the idea is, if you see the really important thing for licensed architect to know about the health, safety, and welfare of the public, how am I going to be finding out the healthy option for the place? And right now, the idea is like, is it going to prevent? Is it prevent? Eliminate or exhaust? Obviously it's not exhaust. It's a different function. It's not going to eliminate need for installation air barrier. That doesn't make sense. Prevent heat transfer from the building into the spaces. heat goes up. So this is up. I think this is actually the logic, but also, it just makes sense, this answer being preventing moisture accumulation and condition dissipation. So, I think even if it's saying like a code, like, okay, can you build this particular type of pipe? I think there's like a process of elimination can help you find the right answer. Okay, let's move on to the next section where we're dealing with building systems, materials, and assemblies. Okay, so this section is going to start to get real. There are going to be questions on the exam. If you've taken it before, then like, there's these dreaded, diagrams. Do I understand what thing goes where? And so that's why I really like the me building, mechanical electrical equipment for building, because it breaks these down, as well as architecture, graphic standards, because you're seeing it and building illustrated, right? You're going to see all these things. And so it's going to be like second nature. You might draw it to a level inside of your projects, but this is going to really push you even further. So as we look into this one, you have a limited amount of time. So that's why it's like spend time looking at these drawings, sketch it really quickly. For instance, this is the type of question that sort of had me at first, but like you study, at the PPI, I've gone through all these diagrams, different types of systems. Is it a split system? Is it a centralized system? So this question is talking about the client for a new mid-rise office building desires a mechanical system that will have minimal operating costs and maintenance, allow maximum flexibility for office space layout, and provide individual control over the interior temperature. Essentially, like, that's partially useful, of course. You go back to it, but you can see the type of system it is from just looking at it, right? You can see that, okay, there are these two components, and there's this centralized component, right? So this is where air is coming out of, and this is where water is going, cooling tower. Cooling tower is going to the cooling tank, right? The heating is going to the heating. So again, and then, how's it going to be controlled? It's controlled at each space, right? That's part of the usefulness of it. This is one of the reasons where you can have that understanding. Again, I didn't get there at first. I had like a lot of struggle with understanding which things are where. But looking at these diagrams, studying them, is where I got that. And Amber Book definitely was giving like the reason behind it, made a ton more sense, because that definitely helped me about understanding about these air handling systems. Having that time with that, having time with these type of diagrams is going to help you in this area. And like if you have only done like really simple diagrams, maybe residential, you will need to be definitely building up on this side, going through construction, these construction illustrated examples, so it. In the section, it does talk about the structural implications. Structure is really simple, knowing about the column, dead load, live load, knowing what you're being asked is going to be really important in these type of questions. So let's read the question. Refer to the exhibit. The cross section includes an interior column. The tributary area for the loading of the column equals 20 feet by 24 feet. Assuming no live load reductions, which one of the following is a design live load for the footing? Okay, it's very simple. It's saying in the question, it says the design live load, right? So it's all these dead load is not going to be hitting on it, right? We're talking about what's a live load, what's a live load, what's a live load, and so tributary area, one of the basic things of structure. Again, if you need that time with structure, either your study resource or one of these structural books will tell you like what you're talking about with tributary area. Pretty much is saying that it's going to be covering from this length to this length, and it's telling you the per square foot that you're going to be multiplying it by. And so essentially that tributary area, right, 20 by 24 feet, so you don't even have to see 3D, right, it's going to be times that square foot live load, right? So it's adding the that information as you're going from each level, roof, floor, right? So you're calculating that coming all the way down, and that's going to be what you're going to be finding in the footing. Like I'm pushing like you to understand these type of situations so you can immediately mix and match, because that's going to help your analysis and your understanding of these types of questions. So again, these really technical ones, if you need some time, like don't try to rush it. Give yourself an hour, give yourself a couple hours to be going through several problems so you can know and be ready for that on the exam. See, this section is actually so jam-packed of questions that are just okay. So let's actually go to this one as well. So this question type, and some of these are actually on the exam. It's like saying what is the best wall type, and you being able to identify. Just you can start this visually, saying, okay, I know this needs to be done this way. You know, I'm thinking important concepts for building code. You know, this is a stairwell that needs to have a fire separation, and this definitely needs to be going up to structure. So I already know that wall is going up to structure. I already know that this little wall right here for the reception, it does, you know, it's a small wall. And I know that a storage room, you know, might not need as much height going into it. You know, it doesn't say it's hazardous storage. And the same thing for here, like I know that the sound that we're trying to hide from going from both of these spaces tells me this wall needs to be going to the top of the structure. So, you know, there's some information about that I can see like right off the bat visually for these type of questions. So these are going to be things that you're going to see, and that's going to be helping you as you take these exams, you know, to the structure for sound, to the structure for fire protection. And this wall that just stops above the ceiling is just basic, right? It needs to go to the ceiling, right? So getting like a lot of these sort of graphic things, understanding from the books, but also going through study resources, breaking down these systems is going to be really helpful for the building code questions. Now let's look at the project integration and programs of programming systems. So it's just saying, you know, essentially you're saying program. How does your program go into the what you have, right? Program is not going to be putting the idea of, you know, we have to be competent as architects to figure out what room needs to go where, what layout is important. And you might be shifting around some programs to figure out what works. But the idea is, you know, calm down and just find out what is the main idea and then be organizing it. And that's in your studying resources. That's why you're looking at plans for saying, why does this work? You might have worked in a firm where you're like not exactly sure where design is, or maybe you said, oh, look, this is beautiful. But in this exam, you're going to say what works, you know, what works exactly, you know, what works according to like principle. And so that's going to be what's going to be important for this division. And okay, so let's look at these. And so these are going to be definitely the most fun for sure. So we're looking at, you know, building configuration, building systems being integrated, program requirements, environmental context. So again, this mimics a lot of the programming analysis items. So for here, like for example, this question is talking about the plan below shows a new community center plan for a existing apartment complex. The community center will include 4 main programs areas with the following requirements. Boom, this is going to be telling you your filter, right? It says click the quarter, so but you're focusing at the end. It says click the quadrant floor plan that is most suitable for the exercise room. So essentially it gives you that focus. So don't get distracted when they give you a lot of information. You're focused on saying, okay, what's the most important thing for the exercise room? And then you're saying, okay, I have to determine these 2 spaces. So it's, you know, it's a process of elimination. It's order. I definitely for this question, you know, this type, you would probably highlight the key phrases, because essentially you're just locating one. It's like hit that point, and that's going to really help you, you know, because it's the hierarchy, right? The hierarchy won't go back, right? The exercise room needs to be there. So that demand is going to help you for these questions. You know, don't try to locate everything. That's not what you're called to do. And so that sort of way is going to help you in dealing with these type of program questions. And then when we look at this question, is another one. It's definitely talking about, hey, look, okay, the client for this partial office renovation has requested a new studio to be used for video broadcast due to existing conditions, the studio must be located adjacent to the existing HVAC closet, service room, and mailroom. So that's immediately going to trigger you to be thinking about, okay, boom, there's sound, boom, there's things that are going to get in the way of this silent room. So what's the best way to deal with this? And so that, again, like I said, the sound chapter, acoustics for me was really useful as me understanding, because I didn't really know that much about sound design. And Aaron book has some great things about sound design, you know, impact class, how sound actually works with this wall. And so that's what you're going to be using to answer a question like this. And you know, the idea is like, which one of these is actually going to be correctly solving the problem? And the idea is like double stud partition, you know, between the studio and other rooms, sitting structural deck above. Like that's like even a keyword, the structural deck above, just like that previous question. It's like the idea is like, what really solves the problem? These are things that you're going to look for as you're studying. And I'm going to go into how to study as we get through this last section. And so that was the answer for this one. And the last question here is actually just very much a side question. It's talking about, okay, where's the best place for trees on this site, right? And of course you're saying, okay, it's saying which of the following tree arrangement best suited for optimal solar energy utilization. That means from the south. The sun is coming from the south, okay, for a house in the northeast region. So essentially I'm looking at the trees that are going to be in the right place. They cannot be in the way of the sun. So definitely knowing the difference between evergreens and deciduous is going to be important here. Deciduous is that big tree, evergreens is the conifer. That's going to be like critical here. Like I'm needing that to be not on the south side. So it's very very key understanding here. It just triggers from your understanding of like sun, wind, and light, or looking at the different resources. So you're bringing that into play. And the final question actually here is definitely a more complicated one of organizing things. And so the idea is you're trying to make simple what you're reading. If it's going to take longer, maybe you mark it and come back. But that's going to be the concept here with these types of questions. The final section is project cost and budgeting, where you're definitely going to have to do some calculation, but it's still about values and knowing how to identify and solve that problem. Okay, let's look at the section. It says evaluate design alternatives based on the program, perform cost evaluation, evaluate cost consideration during the design process. So this section is, in these type of problems, again, it's not in order. It's going to be where it's saying like, okay, you're going to be weighing the cost, right? The architect, you're not trying to give the most expensive solution. You're trying to use your knowledge to save the client money, to give optimal solutions that perform the function. And project cost and budgeting is going to be a really critical part of that. So the idea is it's knowing the cost per square foot. It's just doing some simple calculations. In the end, you know, so just simplify it as you're understanding. I'm going to go through some of these questions and the ideas. I'll tell you the filter to look at when taking and looking at that particular question type. One of the first questions here is saying a mechanical engineer has proposed 2 different HVAC systems for a new project. Essentially, boom, I know I'm going to be comparing. There you go. Either system is suitable for the project type and location, but for tax purposes, the owner prefers a higher HVAC equipment depreciation cost over the life cycle of the system. So I'm not going to calculate here. But this question is obviously putting you in the place where you need to know, boom, this is going to be more expensive, and it's just be very simple. Like if something is over 20 years for something over 9 years, just find the simple equation, and that's one of the reasons. Like with the study resources, seeing that formula before, you just put in the formula and you make the answer for that one. That's a simple way of just getting through there. It actually provides the fewest of the examples for that. But essentially, those questions, it's a small part of the exam, but it's important for you to be able to just do those calculations. Now to go into a little bit of my experience taking the exam for project planning and design. Essentially, I had studied with my architect exam prep materials, and that was the first time I took it. I did not really buy the books. I was like trying to buy the minimum amount of books and just looking for resources online. And it was like the first exam that I did not pass, and it was heartbreaking to say the least. But it was a hard exam, so I was like, okay, it's hard. I'll come at a hard exam. I just really did not know how much I did not know, especially considering the systems and considering applying different things about the sun and how to arrange, like windows, or the monitor question was one thing that really got me. Or even one question was like, where is the heat being lost in this wall? So the idea is I needed to go over a lot of these resources. And when I was in the exam, I also had like a lot of issues with IBC because I had not really sort of memorized like at least the structure of it so I can find information. And I was like struggling trying to find some of the key information, like the occupancy and different types of load. So essentially it's like my first try at the pressure, and it really got me. And the idea is I definitely knew I was out of my depth that first exam, and that's why I after failing that exam, I had to really buy like some of those books. I knew I needed to buy the books. However, even with buying those books, I knew I was still not ready. So I went ahead and did Amber Book, even though it was a little more expensive. It was definitely worth the money to really show my knowledge, really having the insight. Like, I'm a video learner, even though I did everything, study cards, all this other stuff. Reading, but definitely I needed to have that video understanding, and I was like sketching every day as I was understanding the systems, understanding what it meant for the air handling system or that plumbing system. Like, understanding that was really critical for me. And Amber Book is definitely the exam that sort of set me apart for knowing about PPD and being really confident and ready to pass it. And so I went through those resources, and the next time I took it, I passed. I was ready. I spent a lot of time learning about the exam, taking the practice exam. I did the whole exam, even though it was general then. Now it's gonna start to be like we do each particular section, and like I used everything. I would eliminate, I would highlight, the ideas. I would mark out things that were wrong. I would focus on the critical information. And so like I was super confident when I took it the next time, because it's like I know this stuff. And so some people say that you should study for PPD and PDD. Actually passed PPD and then failed PDD. So there's that whole concept of like, okay, well, you passed, fail. Like, it's even becoming a little unclear which one came first, but the idea is like, whatever it was, I was not ready for PDD, and I needed another level. And that's where I actually went even deeper into the building code, because that's going to be really critical for that. But for CE and PPD, this was a really great Amber Book, and just going into all those materials, going into all those systems. Like I said, I bought the books, but it was like a lot to go through. Like, again, like you're not gonna read MEB and go to work and be normal. In fact, the idea is you're looking for story, you're looking for ideas, you're looking for graphics, so you can recognize different systems and how things work. And so essentially I went through that process of buying the books, knowing that, okay, I'm not just going to go through them. I'm going to get the information I need. I'm going to resource, put them in study cards, and then I'm also going to take another video course so I can understand what things are what, and understand it on a higher level. And so when I did that, it was very calm, very relaxed, and I passed that second exam, and it was really great. So I have now these ways to help you as you're figuring out your study plan for PPD. So essentially, knowing the 5 areas, knowing the critical types of questions that are going to be put before you, you're going to be clicking here, you're going to be calculating this. Essentially, you're just going to make sure that you're not just reading. You're going to be looking for key visual information, key ideas, because it's going to match with how NCARB is asking you to evaluate that question. And so as you are going through, you're going to be looking at the ways that you can filter your studies into the exam. And so studying on a particular area is really going to be key. I like the way that Book is set up, and also some other different resources. I like how they're set up. So essentially go through their program, but then evaluate, do you know this or that? So when I was going through MEEB, that's one of the things that I had to face, of like saying, okay, I'm going to choose a section to go through, for instance, sound or another area. That helped me tremendously to figure that out. And then essentially do those calculations. You'll have to do the calculations. You'll have to be looking at a building and saying, okay, northwest, east, south, like doing practice exams. So you need to be definitely testing out your knowledge, going through study cards, doing practice exams on this PPD level, and it will be really pushing you forward to understand and to be able to really face the exam quickly. And this includes for IBC. I did a lot of sketches to understand things. I think that's really valuable, and also going through and understanding the IBC as well, just knowing how to really access it really fast. Though I did not start ARE questions before taking PPD, it would have been incredibly high value, but essentially I was really happy with what I had, and it really helped me. It was something that I think for you to really just, if you want to invest in Amber Book, or if you're just really trying to get more valuable with the resources that are suggested, just make sure you're looking for sections like an ARE 5 community for things that you need to study. And again, I'll put my links below in the description so you can be thinking about what things are good for you. So essentially, that's my study recommendations. Again, when you get to take that exam, when you're in the exam, just like we were looking at those questions, you're looking for key information, you're looking to simplify, and you're going to use the elimination tool so you can be giving a good answer and just quickly get through it to the end, and really go through, try to do a minute on each question. Definitely try to avoid going past a minute and a half. You can always come back. You will pretty much make sure that when you're doing your case studies, maybe you read the first question and go through the materials and then take a break. You'll be thinking about it during your break. I use my break to be thinking a little bit and a little rest. But then the idea you're coming back and the fact is you're still trying to push through. You get the key information when you're reading. Give that solid time. You're gonna come back and you're gonna answer the question. You give more time to those case studies, but essentially you're not getting stuck. You're not going to be spending 20 minutes on a question. Don't do that. And that's the reason for learning about the IBC, how to navigate through it, learning how to navigate through the other parts of the exam, or the resources, like knowing how to navigate through zoning document, knowing how to navigate through the code. That's something you do way before. So when you're coming to the exam, you can be able to go through it very quick and find out what you need to find. And then essentially when you're finished, don't go, this is a hard test, but don't go second guessing yourself. You mark the ones that you had issue with. You come back and review it. Again, you're reviewing it, really trying to keep it in that same time frame. If you don't know it, you don't know it. Again, the passing scores on this, the passing statistics are a little bit low, but the idea is like you don't have to get 100% of every answer. Some of the things are not even scored. So if you were wasting time on a question that won't be scored, that's a problem. But the answers that you do know, you've tested to find out your competence, make sure you answer those to your best. And so that's just a matter of focus and a matter of calming down, going through resources that you're given, and answer the question to the one that you are needed to answer. The same thing for calculations. You just simplify it in your head, so you're putting together things that are showing your competence as an architect to consider these questions. And so those are my takes for passing PPD in the ARE exams. This has been Brandon with I Am Studio, and I hope that's been very useful. You can check the link in the description for other of these exam tips videos. And this channel is for making content for architects. A lot of my contents are tutorials for design and modeling for various programs. If you like this video, give it a like, and subscribe to this channel if you want more great content for architects and designers, and tutorials, and the best software and design methods.